And we are with our guest of today's podcast, episode 191. We have Jim Murray, and Jim is from Rhode Island, smallest state in the United States, right, Jim?
Yes, and you would
I
be
heard that in geography.
so impressed, or I guess so surprised, or maybe because I'm from Rhode Island, how many people I leave Rhode Island and I go to the Midwest, and they're like, "Oh, Rhode Island, that's a part of New York, right?" I'm like, "No, it's the smallest state in the union, right?"
That's
I,
awesome.
I feel like that's knowing like Alaska is the biggest one, right? So I don't know. I feel like that goes hand in hand from elementary school geography, but a lot of people must have missed that day of school.
That's right. That's right. That's awesome, man. Well, I don't meet too many people from Rhode Island, so I'm really excited about today's show. And I know you have so many nuggets and stories. You built a massive property management company, Lyon Property Management Group, and you're managing 700 plus units right now. But you started out house hacking, building up small, doing some wholesaling deals, talking to some tired landlords. And I want you to start from the beginning, man. How did you get started and bring us up to today?
Yeah. So honestly, I got really lucky in the beginning. So my dad always talks about how sometimes you have to be lucky to be good. And that's the epitome of how I got where I am today, outside of trying to work really hard. Um, when I originally came out of college, I didn't realize how good the real estate market was. So I graduated from Ohio State, shout out to my Buckeyes, fellow Buckeyes, in 2010. And I landed my first job with a financial institution in Rhode Island. I was a financial analyst by day and want to be house hacker by night. The first realtor that I started to work with, she didn't really give me a great education. It was a family referral. She was a very nice woman. And 6 months later, I hadn't bought anything. And I found out that she had bought five of the properties that we had toured. So kind of bought them out from underneath me. But I
Wow.
mean, she was buying three families in Woonsocket, Rhode Island for roughly 50,000. They needed pretty substantial rehabs. Those same properties are selling for about $250,000 today, just to give you perspective from kind of 2010 to 2019.
Wow.
So tremendous upside. She was seasoned, experienced, knew what stage of the market we were at. And then I put it aside for a while. So I tried to focus on getting to Wall Street, making a ton of money, and then coming back to get into the real estate thing. So I ended up chasing the chartered financial analyst designation. It is one of the toughest professional tests that you can take. And my first time taking it, I scored in the top 10% of the failures. So that was an eye-opening experience. I invested a ton of time, roughly $5,000 of my own capital to get absolutely nowhere.
Wow.
So that was my pivot point, right? So I sat there and I said to myself, well, do I chase real estate investing? Can I get started for, around $5,000 down, because I would have to invest the same money to go and study for the CFA designation again. And I ended up going to like a Saturday morning breakfast networking meeting, and I met a gentleman by the name of John Boss, and he's still, I consider him still a mentor to this day, but he taught me cash flow. And the rest is kind of history from there. So within 6 months from that meeting, he ended up getting me into my first multifamily property. Candidly, when I bought it, I had no idea what house hacking was, but I was house hacking for sure. I didn't get into bigger pockets until after my first house hack, when I started to try to get into wholesaling. So the way my first house hack looks, I bought a four-family property in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. For Boston investors, when they come down, they typically look at Pawtucket first. It's north of Providence, Rhode Island, just to give you guys more of a geography education. But during the Industrial Revolution, there were a ton of multifamily properties for all of the mill workers. So you could imagine, like, these are built between like 1880 to 1920. So they're pretty old. Most of them retired, not well kept up with. So huge opportunity to kind of stay up and keep up with those. I bought, hands down, still the ugliest house in Pawtucket, but I bought it for 140,000 for a 4 unit, and I had a 3-car garage behind it. And again, you got to be lucky to be good. The way that I purchased this property is the way that I look for properties today. So something that has fairly solid infrastructure, but below market rents. So when I talk about infrastructure, I'm talking like electrical systems, heating systems, roof. Those are the things you want to look at. Make sure they're in fairly good shape, or you can budget for the anticipated CapEx, capital expenditure, but really low rents. So I can remember one of my rents in that building was $400. It was a studio, and all utilities were included.
Wow.
I have that up to
So you're making like
$700.
$60.
Yeah, right. So I have that up to $700 today with heat and hot water included. So I removed the electricity. I know a lot of investors, and this is kind of more property management experience, are very concerned about including utilities.
Mm.
If you're including heat and hot water, those are very manageable expenses. It's the electric that is not a manageable expense, or at least I haven't figured out how to manage that yet. Even if you charge tenants more, or maybe you back bill them, but still, if you put it in your name and then you bill them back, the chase is really on.
Mm-hmm.
So buy that first 4 unit. It cost me roughly $10,000 and a ton of my own time to get it up and running. And honestly, I used a creative financing strategy in the Home Depot card. So I went to Home Depot. I started putting a bunch of stuff on the card. It was roughly a mile from the property. My dad helped me tackle some of the major projects, but I quickly realized that I could get essentially interest-free financing from Home Depot. So the biggest part of the front end of this journey is having good credit. And that may sound really basic or cliche, but having good credit is going to save any financial difficulty you have in this business, in the sense that if you come across a scenario where you're cash poor, you should be able to leverage that good credit to hopefully raise some capital to get you through that tough time.
Mm-hmm.
So outside of my down payment, I had maybe $1,000 in my bank account when I bought that first one, and I just levered the crap out of that Home Depot card, betting on myself that I would generate the cash flow. So 2 months into owning that property, I took the rent roll from roughly $1,000 with really poor leases up to $2,800 per month. It's now at $3,600 a month gross rent roll on a monthly basis. The reason why I was only able to take it from 1,000 to 2,800 up front is because I was living in the property. So if we think about that $2,800 upfront that I'm generating gross rents by, it was essentially March of 2013. My mortgage was only $1,040 per month. So on top of other expenses that I had with water and sewer bills, and maybe some maintenance here and there, I was essentially, making close to $1,000 per month, not factoring in capex, vacancy, some of those softer costs. But I'm getting paid to live in the first 4 unit that I bought, which was incredible. So I'm sitting there, 3-4 months in, and I'm like, holy cow, this is a really cool opportunity. How do I do this again? But now I have no money. So I start looking at wholesaling. And I picked 3 lists to mail to. So one was an inherited list. I've never gotten so many death threats in my life from mailing that inherited list. They're like, how'd you get my number? I'm like, I didn't have your number. You just called me. I just had an address of a house that had a lot of equity in it. Now I did know it was inherited, but these people were they were not happy.
They're in tough situations. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a very close friend that's a wholesaler still to this day. He was the one who introduced me to that list. He has a ton of success with it. I didn't have the ability to talk to those folks.
Yeah.
So this is when I started mailing a probate list, which is kind of similar to the inherited list. And the probate list, I didn't have any success with either. And the third one, I ended up mailing a high equity list. So I looked for houses that had a mortgage note of $100,000 or less. That's what worked in that stage of the cycle for me in terms of where properties are valued. And I targeted Pawtucket, Rhode Island, and Attleboro, Massachusetts. My first wholesale deal came out of Attleboro, Massachusetts. It was a tired landlord. His name was Don. And when he got to the table and saw that I was making $15,000 in the wholesale deal, his eyes almost popped out of his head. And I was like, hey, so because this is a tough part with wholesalers, right? Because there are multiple strategies of how to close the deal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to fast forward to when I first got that phone call from Don. He said, hey, listen, I've got a 3-family on Mechanic Street in Attleboro. I would like $150,000 for the property. It's fully rented. And immediately I knew I had a deal.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew at that point that property could be worth anywhere from $200,000 to $225,000. There are 3 4-bedroom units. And I said, okay, when can I get out to see it? I went out there with my mentor, who I mentioned earlier. We decided that it was a really good deal. And he had an attorney client that was looking to purchase property, and we wholesaled it to her for $165,000. But sitting at the closing table, and Don is out of his mind, seeing that we're making $15,000 on this wholesale deal. And I had to remind him, I said, hey, Don, listen, you're really tired of managing these tenants. He's like, yeah. I said, when you called me, you asked if I could pay $150,000, right? He said, yep. I said, well, I'm delivering exactly on that. I'm providing you exactly what you asked for. He said, you know what? Absolutely. Signed on the line.
Hmm.
But I think a lot of wholesalers, when they get started, they get nervous about that. But you have to recognize the value that you're providing.
Hmm.
It wasn't like I negotiated them down like I do on most wholesale deals nowadays. That was what he asked for, and that's exactly what I provided him. So I think that's the biggest piece of advice that I can provide to wholesalers. Know the value that you provide. Even if it's your first, second, third wholesale deal, you're a little bit nervous about the process. Hang tight, be a professional, and really go back to that distressed seller and talk them through the value that you're providing to them.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with that. And I think it's a lot of wholesalers do get hung up on that. And sometimes buyers get hung up on that too, on the price tag. And you did a great job just reminding him exactly at the closing table that you gave him exactly what he wanted. And that obviously he got out of the situation. He had a problem and you helped solve it. And I think one of the biggest things is we forget it's not about really what you know, which as wholesalers, when we are experts, we know a little bit more about real estate. But this guy, he knew about real estate. He'd been managing this property for years, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yep.
But sometimes it's about who you know. And as you're in this business, start to know a lot of people and we just connect the dots. And other people can't do that, right? And that
Right.
comes at a value. So I think
So
that's a great thing.
here's the really cool part about this, because the investor that we sold it to recently sold it as well. So we wholesaled it to her for 165. She invested roughly $20,000 in it over the course of owning it for, I would say, roughly 5 years. She just sold it for 350,000.
Oh, wow.
So I think that that's really cool to provide perspective on the market. But I think that's really cool too, because a lot of folks think if the wholesaler is making this, huge fee up front, is there going to be room for the investor on the backside? And that's up to the investor to conduct their due diligence to make sure that they have those margins. But I think that's a home run all around. The seller got out of the distressed asset. I made a chunk of money on the wholesale fee. The owner made money from renting it out over the course of 5 years, plus had a huge capital gain on the backside. So
Hmm.
that's just win, win, win all the way across the board.
Yeah, definitely. So, Jim, I want to just kind of back up a little bit and talk about that 4 unit you first bought. And I think it's just a
Yep.
great strategy. Sometimes people skip over, and I know it depends a lot, maybe on the stage of life that you're in. If you
Yep.
can house hack, or if you're married, if you have kids, and
Right.
sometimes, but sounds like you had just gotten out of college. It was a great fit for you. And there's other ways to house hack by doing something different than just buying a 4 unit and renting it out to other tenants. You can have an in-law suite
Yep.
house that you can rent out to professionals. Like, you don't have to cramp your lifestyle. I've had guys on a podcast before where they do something different with house hacking, that they can have a family still and do all that. But in your case, probably talking to single people or newly married couples, and they want to pay for their mortgage. And not only did you pay for your mortgage, but you actually were making money on the
Yes.
place that you were living in, which I think is awesome. And that jump started you into this business, and you started wholesaling, and then you really started getting interested into property management. So where did that kind of come into play after you wholesaled a couple of these deals?
Yeah. So I start clearing these wholesale deals, and I ended up raising enough capital that I could buy my second house hack. So here's the cool part. I buy my first. So the best part about house hacking is that you can come in with owner occupied financing. So on my first house, I went to Rhode Island Housing, which is our local housing authority, and they had a product where if you had above a 700 credit score, you wouldn't have to pay private mortgage insurance. And it was a 5% down product on a 4-family property. It was 3.5% on a 3-family property, which is really similar to FHA, but it was actually a portfolio loan with Rhode Island Housing. So that's really beneficial because on the portfolio loan front, the folks that you're working with to underwrite the mortgage, they're going to hold the note. So if you develop a good relationship, they'd be maybe more willing that if you don't precisely meet the criteria and you show them that you're a credible person, that they may be able to flex on that criteria a little bit. So when I found my second property, it was in Lincoln, Rhode Island, 4-unit house. I was able to refi the first property because I had one caught the market at the bottom on the first one, and then invested in it and got the rent roll up to a certain point where I could then move that from owner-occupied paper, owner-occupied mortgage, to an investor mortgage with a 70% LTV. So the way to think about it is if I came in with 5% up front, I invested roughly $10,000 on a $140,000 purchase price. And then 2.5 years later, I was able to come in with a 70% LTV product. I think it comped out somewhere around like 250,000. It would have given me an opportunity to take money out, but I didn't. I had a mentor from another business very early on that told me, hey, listen, unless you have something to spend it on, don't take any money out of these properties. I know a lot of investors right now who are trying to refi their properties because they're at the top of the market, and it may hurt them when it turns. So that would be a golden nugget piece of advice there. So I moved the first one into investor paper, 70% LTV, and then that cleared that from my credit, and I was able to buy the second one with an FHA owner-occupied mortgage. And on that one, it was a really interesting opportunity where I used a streamlined 203K lending product where the bank would pay for my renovations. So here's the big thing. On a 203K product, there's the streamline, and I think it's called the standard. But essentially, a streamline is $35,000 or less in renovations, and then the standard is going to be $35,000 or more. The streamline is exactly as it states. It's levels easier. There's a draw at the beginning of the project for 50% and a draw at the end for 50%. There aren't a lot of contractors out there that like to work these projects because some contractors are going to live hand to mouth, or at least the ones that will probably give you the best deals. On the standard product, above $35,000 in renovations, it becomes levels more difficult and more expensive. There are going to be multiple draws, but also anytime you would like that draw, you need to have that FHA appraiser come out and say, yep, all of these things are done in order to warrant this draw. And you have to pay for that. So I think it's between like $100 to $200 and may be different depending on where you're located. But I would say if you can get into a 203K product, make sure that it's that streamlined product and it's an extremely easy process. The other big thing related to that is if you buy a property, you're essentially allowed to over-improve it a little bit, because I'm pretty confident, and I may be speaking a little bit out of turn here, but I remember that they were going to allow me, even on the renovation, to go upwards of 105% of the value. So if they found it was worth 100,000, I bought it at 70, they would allow me to go up to, give me the 35,000 in renovations that way. So 5,000 more than the property was valued because I was living in it. So that was a really cool opportunity to get me into another great family to really set me up for financial success.
So what did you do personally? Did you stay in that one, or did you move to this new unit and then you filled the other one just with another tenant?
Yeah, so it took me 6 months because I wanted to move into the newly renovated house. So the cool part is so there were 3 units that were occupied. They were getting $500 a month in rent. Immediately, I bumped them all to $750. Only one stayed. The other 2 left. I got those units to $800. The 4th unit was gutted to the sheetrock. And then the 3rd floor had 8 vacant bedrooms. So we tackled a 2nd and 3rd floor townhouse conversion style project. It was the biggest project I had taken on at that point, and it took me 6 months to accomplish that, but I learned a ton in the process. We now get $1,300 a month for that unit. I'm just trying to provide numbers so folks can have an idea of cash flow.
Yeah.
And the $1,300 a month is just below my $1,500 a month mortgage payment, which includes principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. So that's a fully loaded mortgage amount, and essentially one unit covers that.
Wow.
So it's just found another really good investment to set me up financially. But I ended up living in that townhouse style unit because when it was done, it was really freaking nice. And the area was a lot better too. So it was just nice. There was a bike path close by, and it was nice to take the dog walking down the bike path every night along the river.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like, you really know how to maximize your profits too. As soon as you come in, and you're looking for that infrastructure, right? With good mechanicals, with low rents, and then you can bump the rents. Some people would get scared because they want people to stay, but it sounded like you didn't really care that much.
So that's a really, sorry to cut you short. That's a great point. And that's where we've had success in the property management business as well. If you acquire a building, whether it be for management or through purchase, where the rents are below market, your inherited tenants know what market rate is. I promise you that.
Mhm.
If you come in and you know that market's at 800 and these folks are paying 500, my recommendation would be to increase them just below market. Say, hey, listen, I know you've been here. We value you as a tenant. I'm going to give you the opportunity to stay at 750. Market's at 800. Most folks and a lot of financial firms produce research related to this. Most folks have $1,000 or less in their savings account. So in Rhode Island, our standard is that we ask for first month's rent and a security deposit at tenant move-in. Most people can't handle that.
Mhm.
So increase them just below market. They'll be thankful. They're still getting a deal. You're getting better cash flow, and everyone's going to be happy. As they move out, that's when you increase it to market to really maximize that cash flow. That would be my recommendation.
Awesome.
Um, we've done that time and time again, and I think that's where we've provided a ton of value for our clients in the property management business.
Awesome. Well, sounds good. Well, thank you so much, Jim. This is just a great way to get started. So if one of you, one of our listening audience members out there wants to learn more about house hacking, reach out to Jim. It's a great way you can get owner occupied financing, low rates, low down payments, and use that to leverage. And it sounded like he took his first one, turned it into an investor because he had equity in it now. The
Yep.
market's appreciating. He's raising rents. Things are really looking good for an appraisal. And then you're able to do that again. And now you have been able to you got in the property management business and you are doing multifamilies now. And I really want to get into that. So talk about your business today. What are you guys doing? And what's that looking like, Jim?
Yeah, so I'll start with how I launched my business. So I was always interested in starting a property management business when I found out that I was good at talking to tired landlords to help me escape the 9 to 5. So I caught a year-end review where it didn't go well, and I was just not happy with my position. I walked back to my cubicle and I texted my now partner Chris. I was like, "Hey, we're launching a property management business," and he said, "Can we grab a beer first?" I was like, "All right, well, I'll grab a beer with you, but I'm going to bring the business plan, so you gotta buy in when we're done with that first beer." Um, so it's been a fun ride since then. Um, but essentially, in the property management business, where we're at now, right around 700 units, what we're focused on is providing more of I call it a boutique experience. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but working with the right investors. So one thing that I talk to a lot of investors about is that not every property manager is a right fit for every investor. There's no one size fits all. No manager is going to be perfect. So figure out where you want that manager to play, what you want them to be good at, and what you can deal with them not being as good at. Um, but what we're trying to do right now is make sure we're working with the right clients ahead of the turn of this real estate cycle. We're very late cycle, particularly where we're located, where our margins are compressed. So a lot of investors that are coming in that are buying property, they're buying them at such a high margin, they're not making that much in terms of dollars per door. So the first person they go to is the property manager. Hey, can you reduce rates? As a property manager, I know that we provide a specific value um, within that management fee. So we've held tight in order to keep our portfolio tight. So when this market turns, we're working with the right investors, and we can help our pool of investors begin to scale their portfolio at a faster rate. A lot of our investors right now are keeping capital on the sidelines just because they feel it's so late cycle in this process.
Mm-hmm. So you're seeing a lot of investors really just kind of waiting things out. Then they're liquidating some of their other assets, holding cash, and then when
Yep.
they see a turn, then they're able to put money into the market.
Yeah, so I would tell you that 90% of the phone calls that we're receiving today in terms of leads for new property management prospects, they're all coming from out of state. A lot of folks are coming down from Boston. Um, Boston, Massachusetts is experiencing negative cap rates right now. There's a lot of international capital coming into Boston where they're betting on the capital appreciation in the long run, and they care less about cash flow in the short run.
Mm-hmm.
So you see a lot of money matriculating down from Boston into the Rhode Island market so they can chase that cash flow, which is just driving down cap rates. Um, so I wasn't around the last time this happened, and I'll call it '07, '08. But I have some mentors who were. But it's been really interesting because if you think about when I started kind of at the bottom and now we're trending towards the top, I'm almost coming full cycle here. So
Mm-hmm.
it's been really interesting to kind of gain that perspective.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, we've been talking about it a lot too, kind of positioning yourself, preparing yourself, and then prospering when the market
Right.
turned. Because so many people got crushed when the downturn happened, but then there's so many other people that were prepared that made millions of dollars, right?
Right.
And that's what you're seeing. So what are some other things that you're seeing right now in the markets as far as cash flow goes that, you know, you talk about a boutique experience, and I want to dive into that a little bit, but what are some other things that people can do right now that you're telling your clients how to prepare, how to position themselves for, the next 2 to 5 years?
I would say if you own multifamilies, make sure that you have a solid cash position. So if there's going to be increased vacancy when the market turns, or you have to experience capex, make sure that you're ready and able to handle that. On the flip side, and this is a little bit different than the question that you asked, but at any stage of the cycle, there are always different strategies that you can leverage to make more money. So typically, I'm going to be a buy and hold investor. I want to buy something and hold it forever, kind of like the Warren Buffett strategy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Buy it once, buy it well, and just hold it for appreciation and cash flow. And hopefully, generations from now, my family can benefit from that. That's my number one goal. What we've been doing now, late cycle, is we've been trying to negotiate really good deals on multifamilies and then flip them. So that works well from two perspectives. One is hopefully these things that we pick up, we're good negotiators, so we generate that margin. But when we come in with hard money to buy those assets, because we'll tell the folks that we're cash investors because we have access to good private capital, we're going to work to buy 3 and 4 family properties where we can rent out 2 units, leave 1 vacant, so you can sell it to that owner-occupied borrower who may be willing to buy it at a higher rate.
Mm-hmm.
I think I might have said that a little fast, so I don't know if you have any questions based on how I said that, or if I could better explain it to the listeners. But that's been the opportunity that we've found lately. Traditionally buy and hold, but now we've been flipping the multifamily assets.
Interesting. So yeah, that's just another position that you can do since you're in the business. You know the markets, and like you said, some of those house hacking or owner occupied individuals, they'll pay a little bit more money than an investor would right now. Is that kind of
Absolutely.
what you're talking about, Jim?
Yeah, yeah. So I think even though I'm kind of harping on the fact that it's late stage in the cycle, I may not want to buy things, you should raise capital. There are still opportunities out there. I think that if you truly feel that you're an investor, you should never stop looking. You should never stop hunting because you can always find something where you can generate a return for yourself. The
Yeah.
strategy may be slightly different, but always be on the hunt.
Yeah, definitely. No, I love that. And you talk about your company kind of as a boutique experience. You work with certain individuals. So what does that kind of mean, and what services do you provide for your clients in the property management business that maybe it's a little bit different?
Yeah, so I always talk about our experience as a relationship-based approach. I want to make sure that we build a relationship and then our team acts as your cash flow consultant. That's kind of the tongue-in-cheek term that I use with our clients, in the sense that even if you come into real estate investing and you don't have a clue about cash flowing real estate, let's get on the phone and we can coach you through the strategies of why we do certain things. So our clients, we like to get on the phone with them 1 time per month, have a rundown, talk about all the things that we've worked through. Even if you only own a 3 unit property, let's get on the phone, talk through, hey, these are the things that transpired during the month. This is how we handle it. If you have any questions related to a specific event, let's talk you through why we handle it that way or what our approach would be going forward. But I think the biggest thing in those conversations is saying, hey, this is where we were, this is where we're at, this is where we're going. If we increase your cash flow, can we help you get into another multifamily property? At the end of the day, for me, I want to build a portfolio of residual income for my family to hopefully build generational wealth. That's the target, right? With these investors, they may have a different target. Like I know that my partner in Lyon, the part that he harps on, or the kind of theme that he harps on all the time is, you should be able to buy, or you should target to buy 3 multifamily properties and a single family property. And the way that he looks at it is, hopefully 1.5 of those pays for your mortgage on your single family property. And then the other 1.5 pays for you and your spouse to drive a brand new car for the rest of your lives. And that is a form of financial freedom. And I think that that's a lower bar to set, but that is very achievable for the average investor.
Yeah, no, definitely. I love that. Well, you guys have built an amazing business, and I know that you do some education as well. You guys have a podcast that you're co-hosted with Frank. So Jim and Frank, they host a podcast called the Cashflow Kings. Talk to us about that. When did that get started, and what can people learn from your show?
Yeah, so 2019, I was trying to think of a more interesting marketing strategy. So I started reading Seth Godin. So Seth Godin, a lot of, I call them my internet mentors. So like Andy Frisella, Gary Vaynerchuk, Grant Cardone, those types of guys, they all love Seth Godin. He has, I believe, 10 books on marketing. They're typically like 120 to 140 pages, but they teach you so much. Honestly, I almost failed marketing in college. I wasn't good at it. I don't know. I won't blame the professor. It wasn't what I was interested in. But I read these books and I thought to myself, how can I change my marketing strategy, not only for myself, but for my business in 2019? So my business theme for the year was called Kill 'em with Content, right? So part of that was launching the podcast, and then part of that was doing a weekly video, which we call the Lyon Chronicles, which has gotten a ton of views, and a lot of folks who follow me on Facebook, they see it every week. But that was really to give back, but also show we really know what we're doing,
Mm-hmm.
right? So more with the podcast, it's more about giving back. So we hosted a seminar recently, and we do some one-on-one coaching. But a lot of the content that we provide, typically via daily content on Instagram or the biweekly podcast, is really to give back, to help folks out in the local area or nationally, to teach them how we get started, but then to also hopefully help them level up more quickly.
No, I think it's great. So check out that podcast, the Cashflow Kings, and also we're going to put some links. Talk to you, Jim, about your Facebook. You can follow Jim on Facebook or Instagram. And we're going to put that in our show notes, guys. So check us out at simplewholesaling.com/episode 191. And Jim, thanks for all the nuggets and advice. And we're going to go in now to the part of the show that we like to call a going deep.
Love it.
And I know before the show, we kind of talked about your faith. That's a huge component of your life and your business. And you're able to instill that into kind of what you're doing and really providing a service for people, for their housing, and providing a service for investors and building up that cash flow as well. But talk to us about kind of what's your mission behind this? You're a young guy. Sounds like, you're just kind of getting started in this, but you've been doing it for a while. But I want you to talk about your why and your faith component in your business.
Yeah. So my why is to build, it's really two. So I have 25 affirmations that I write down every day, but number 24 and number 25. So 24 is, and I write it down like I already achieved it, right? So 24 is I built financial freedom for my family. And then 25 is I built generational wealth for my family. That's huge for me.
Mm.
But I think a story that's really cool here, and this is going to be more faith related. So my grandparents on my father's side were always very religious. My grandmother would take me to church every Sunday. I'd try my best to make it to church every Sunday still, but I definitely try to talk to God every day. When I first started the hunt to find my multifamily property, I was looking in Attleboro, Massachusetts. I wasn't looking in Pawtucket at all. I was very close. I looked at a couple different properties. In this process, my grandfather ended up passing away. And this was tough on me. I was the last person to talk to him before he passed away in the middle of the night. And he told me, he said, hey, listen, whatever you are going to do, you need to do it 100% and bet your last penny on it, because that's what you need to chase. And you don't want to regret things when you're older and you're my age. You want to make sure that you get after whatever you dream about chasing. So a couple weeks after that,
that's big from, yeah.
So 1 week after that, he grew up in Pawtucket, Rhode Island on Mulberry Street. 2 weeks after that, I locked up my first multifamily property in Pawtucket. It's on Central Ave. It's on the other side of town, but it was in Pawtucket when I was typically looking at Attleboro for property. I wasn't even really focused on Pawtucket. The rest of the story that's more faith-based is every morning in my parents' house, they had this little block of wood above the kitchen sink. So I wake up, pour myself a glass of water, and there was a prayer on it. It said, Lord, help me to remember that nothing is going to happen to me today that you and I together cannot handle. For whatever reason, within a couple weeks after my grandfather's death, I was always really moved to get that as a tattoo. So I have it on my right side, and I have it in a scroll. And
Mm,
it's just that daily reminder of a prayer that I say to myself. The,
definitely.
the crazy thing here, I showed it to my dad. He goes, "You're never going to believe this." He said, do you know who got that block of wood to put above the sink?" And I'm like, "Nope." He goes, "That was your grandfather." He goes, "One night, my grandfather was a union plasterer. On his way home, dog tired, covered in plaster, he saw this guy broken down on the side of the road. He helped him fix his tire, and the guy that was broken down on the side of the road gave him that little block of wood, and it's been in my grandparents' kitchen, now my parents' kitchen ever since."
Wow.
So I think that's kind of a really cool faith-based story of like, my grandfather was always very religious, but even in his passing, he's kind of provided kind of signs for me to keep following to let me know that I'm heading in the right direction.
Wow. I love those stories. And that was, it sounds like you have an amazing family uh,
Absolutely.
as well. And just for your grandfather to say that, I think it's just such great advice, especially sometimes we have to make those decisions during times of crisis or a loved one passes away. And that really kind of, makes us reflect and think about being more significant, what life's all about. And it's so short. I mean, nobody ever says, man, life takes,
Yeah.
forever, right? It's always like,
Yeah.
that's so fast. It's so short, right?
Yep.
And I love that. Just going after 100%. Don't regret anything. And exactly
I,
what you're doing, man.
yep. I always say to the last penny. That's how I remember that story. To the last penny, chase it.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. And so it sounds like you have a family now. Talk to us about that. And you know, what's that mean to you? And you talked about just kind of the affirmations about building generational wealth. And are you able to bring what you're doing now into your family? I don't know if you have any your children or not, but talk to us about how you
Yeah.
want to teach and use what you're learning now in your family.
Yeah. So I have a 3-year-old son. His name is Connor. Connor is amazing, incredibly creative, endearing. And one of the things that I think about in being a parent, where I think, and I won't get too political here, hopefully, um, but I think like our current educational system just forces kids to kind of to buy into the structure and kind of lose that creativeness.
Mm,
And as a dad, from a family perspective, one of the biggest things for me is he's super creative and intelligent now, and I want him to always keep that. I want him to feel that it's okay to take those risks.
mhm.
And it doesn't have to be as an entrepreneur, as a real estate investor. Take those risks in whatever he sees fit. If he decides to go out and play the saxophone, maybe he goes and auditions at some crazy like blues cafe or something. I don't know. I'm trying to come up with a cool story here, but you know, that's my kind of my biggest opportunity as a dad in my own eyes. How do I continue to foster that creativity and show him that it's okay to take the risks that he finds fit for his life? Um, but man, he's got a ton of energy, and he's polar opposite from me as a child. I was super introverted, didn't like to talk to people, and he's extremely outgoing and full of energy. So it's been an amazing experience being a father.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that too. One of our family core values is embrace your passions. So
Yeah,
I think everybody's wired a little bit different, and I have 4 kids, so
that's awesome.
they're not all the same as me, and some of them are, but I just say, whatever you're passionate about, just embrace, just go after it,
That's it.
don't hold
I'm with
back.
you 100%. Yep.
Because again, it's just too short, and I'm with you all the way. So, well, thanks for sharing with that, Jim. I really appreciate you being on the show today, and we're running out of time now, and we're going to end the show like we end every show, and that's with a little touch of randomness. So,
Awesome. I'm excited for this part and a little bit nervous too.
so I've prepared 3 random questions for you. So don't have to take it too serious, man. Just name the first thing that comes to your mind on these.
Awesome.
All right, number 1. So if this is a fun one, but if you were a potential tenant, would Lyon Property Management Group rent to you, and why?
Absolutely. I have great credit. That's the first thing that comes to my mind. And I feel like I've harped on that. Um,
No, you have. And that's awesome getting out of college and having great credit. When I got out of college, I think my credit was like a 530 or something. It was just crap. So
so that's a big thing that foots back to the story, and hopefully I don't go on too much of a sidebar. But um, house hacking in the beginning, people say I don't have the money, and I didn't have that much. But when I came out, I had $70,000 in student loans, and my payment on those loans was $817 a month, and I just paid them off recently. Um, so you can figure it out, and that's what I tell people. Like, I didn't come out and have a silver spoon. I had to figure it out on my own. I do have great parents that help me out, but don't let student loans get you stuck where you think that you can't invest.
Love it. Love that advice. So have good credit. It's really important. That's awesome. All right. Number two, when things break, so you're in the property management business, so you probably have things break all the time. And
All the time.
so if something breaks, do you fix it or do you replace it?
I would say typically replace, only because I'm going to start with toilets for lack of a better start. But specifically with toilets, a lot of investors will come in and they'll replace every single toilet in the building because most of the issues start with water, and some tenants like to throw stuff down the toilets that maybe shouldn't go down there. So particularly with a toilet, you can replace like the guts of a toilet for like 75 to 100 with labor and materials, or you can buy a new one for a couple hundred. So in that scenario, buy a new one. The same thing I think about appliances. We typically buy used appliances from a local dealer, and they're really like a scratch and dent store. So they're new. They might not be perfect, but they still look pretty good. In the case of the appliance, if we can get a used refrigerator for 250 bucks for a larger one, if we send the appliance technician out there, it's $79 just to get them there.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, used parts for appliances is an absolute racket. We've come across where you want to get like a replacement shelf and a freezer, and it's like $150 just for the shelf. And I'm like, so in that sense, replace it. But
Yeah.
that's the balance. I would say if it's like, if the cost to repair is 40 to 50% of the replacement, just replace it.
Yeah. I think it depends. Yeah. I mean, it always just, like if it's a furnace, it depends on the age of it, things like that.
Oh, furnace repair, right? If it's that larger ticket item,
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Last random question. So this is really random, but if your food is bad at a restaurant, so you're at a restaurant, you order food and just not very good, what is your response typically?
I'm gonna be honest. Most of the times, I'll just suck it up and eat it. I get nervous. So I will tell you, one of my bigger struggles that I'm working on this year is relaying bad news. I struggle to relay bad news. Um, so I'm working on that now. If it was absolutely terrible, stone cold, then I'm going to stop the waitress and say, "Hey, listen, need a little bit of help. I know this is not your fault, but the food's stone cold, or this isn't what I ordered." But a lot of times, I'll share this with you. I just don't like onions. It's like a texture issue, and if I get a sandwich with like onions on it, I'll just pick it off. So I think that gives you a little bit of insight there.
No, that's
That's a
good.
fun question though. But in that scenario, I don't want it to go back into the kitchen and have them spit on it. I get nervous with stuff like that. So
I'm right there with you. I would just eat it or not eat it. I wouldn't really say anything. But I've been with people. My wife, she would probably say something. But I've been
yeah.
with people that make me feel uncomfortable because they say something and they're like, I don't even want to look at it. Just take it away. Just don't. Just
No,
get
if
out.
there was like a big like clump of hair in it or something, like
Yeah.
I'm definitely raising my hand, flagging them down. But if it's just slightly below average or not perfectly what I wanted, I'm gonna stomach it. I'll eat it. Yeah.
Sounds good, Jim. Well, hey, thank you so much for being on the show today, as I already mentioned. And I want to give you one last opportunity to, if one of our listening members wants to reach out to you, they have some more questions about property management, they're in your area, they need property management, they're interested in multifamily, whatever that looks like, where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah. So the best place to find us for property management is going to be Lyon, Lyon, propertygroup.com. You can find our business phone number on there and reach out. And then if you guys are interested in following me on Instagram, my handle on Instagram is at the notorious CFK.
Awesome. And you guys can check those out. That is, again, lionpropertygroup.com, correct?
Correct. You got it. Yep.
And check out his Instagram handle on our show notes at simplewholesaling.com/episode 191. And that's a wrap with Jim Murray. Thank you so much, Jim. It has been an honor having you a guest on today's show, man.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.